Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Valentine's Day Makers Exchange. Nothing shows how much you care more than a handmade gift. My name is Leah. I will be your host for today's live event, and today we have an entire panel of Craftsy instructors that are joining us to share their ideas for celebrating your special ones and spreading the love this Valentine's Day. Before I bring them on, introduce them, and get to chatting with them, however, a couple announcements from me. Throughout the next hour, they will be discussing these patterns that they designed for Valentine's Day, and they have all been bundled into an ultimate pattern bundle. It is free for you to download right now, and this bundle 3 recipes and nearly 100 pages of instruction. So click the link in the description so you can download this bundle right now. That's going to be super exciting, but we also have more. In addition to this free pattern bundle, we are excited to announce another Craftsy mini series. It's coming up next week. So starting January 30th, we'll have a new instructor going live every day of the week to teach a Valentine's Day inspired project. You will have the opportunity to download all 5 free patterns next week, plus tune in live to watch all of the instructions. Our instructors will knit an adorable cupcake, crochet a pair of beautiful heart earrings, bake delicious sweet cherry hand pies, decorate 3 interactive Valentine cookies, and sew a smoochy lip throw pillow. So let us know in the chat which project it is that you're looking forward to the most, and make sure to join us next week. Those projects are always a ton of fun, and we'll get them in before Valentine's Day so you can have those gifts ready to go for your loved ones. That's enough for me for now. So now it's time to meet our amazing panel of experts. We have from the studio, Brenda KB Anderson. From her home, Jen Lucas. Also in the studio, Emily Steffen, and also from her home studio, Colleen Tauke. So I'm going to go one by one and have each of our fantastic panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Colleen. So Colleen, you've designed many Valentine's Day quilt patterns for Craftsy and National Quilter Circle. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about them and a little bit about yourself and maybe what you're looking forward to this Valentine's Day.
Okay. Well, Valentine's Day was always kind of a special treat at our house growing up, because there was always going to be a surprise on Valentine's morning. My mom always planned something out. And so one of the projects that I presented in the past was inspired from something that she made. Now this, I won't tell you how many years old it is, but I kept it all these years because my mom had used some pieces of corduroy, back when corduroy was cool, way, way back, and now it's cool again. And it had broidered, Be Our Valentine on it, and used some rickrack to decorate it. So that inspired a project later on that I came up with. But something red, something pink always was also accompanied that. So you always had a new pair of red socks or pink socks to wear to school that day. So using some of those things from the past to create new projects, the backpack buddy, which I decided to make small versions of that little pillow for my grandkids so they could hang it on their backpack and get for Valentine's Day, so they would always remember that Grandma was thinking about them even when they were at daycare at school. So the backpack buddy project is out there in the bundle. And then also, of course, in our world, we supersize everything. So we have to make, kind of a mimic of the pillow, doing some kind of flip and sew kind of a scrappy interpretation of what I did for the little backpack buddies. So that was one of the projects I did. I grew up sewing. My mom was a seamstress. She sewed for people all over town, did a lot of things, but nobody was really a quilter in my family. So quilting came to me later on, after my last kid was starting preschool or kindergarten, preschool age, and all of a sudden a friend came to me and said, "Oh, let's take this class." And I thought, quilting. I mean, I make garments, okay, but quilting's a whole nother monster. So once I started into quilting, I left the garment sewing behind and said, quilts can fit everybody and anybody, but learning how to make those little tiny 1/4-inch seams was a whole nother ball of wax. So, but once I got into it, absolutely loved it. One of the very first projects I did for the group here was to create a placemat that had a heart-inspired shape in the center, and this one was really popular. As I created it, I kept thinking a name for it, and then it came across that at Valentine's, everybody remembers those little Valentines we exchanged at school and those little notes that were on it. So instead of just sewing this into the placemat, I created a pocket where you could put that, because we always exchange cards between I and my husband. We always is a big deal, and little notes. So I thought, well, what a fun place to hide that Valentine card, because a lot of times we celebrate at home. We don't always go out for a meal because it's kind of crazy getting into restaurants and stuff. And so having a love note placemat where you can put away your little special message for dessert time after the meal. So that was created as my very first Valentine project for our group here. The backpack buddy was next. Then I was playing around with designs that repeat, kind of like, the folded up little snowflakes in a chain or paper dolls. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have hearts that kind of look like that? So the love line placemat then came along, repeating that shape across, kind of like a cutout, something simple that we could get done within the timeline of, oh, I want to make something for Valentine's and it's a week away. So this is really a doable project. And sticking with that nostalgia kind of era, I was thinking back to what projects we used to do to get ready for Valentine's Day at school when I was a kid. And those Swedish heart little pouches we would make with two fabrics woven together kind of inspired this one, so that I picked two fabrics, just a really small print along with the pink, very traditional fabrics. You could play with any set of fabrics, combinations you want, but creating that woven Swedish heart feel with little pieces. I hadn't really worked with tiny, getting down to really small pieces. So that was a kind of a challenge too, to work with small pieces instead of, large oversized pieces, and have some fun. And then, play with the quilting, because as quilters, our skills tend to go really fast in the piecing, but the actual machine quilting we sometimes lag behind. And kind of just going back to really traditional crosshatch quilting. So if I hold it up, hopefully you can kind of see, there you can see the dimension that just crosshatching goes on something like this, which makes it very fun, very doable. It's easy to do straight lines on the domestic machine. On the long arm, it's a whole nother experience. But when we were doing straight lines on the domestic machine, gives a very traditional kind of throwback to that era of growing up, doing Valentines at school, collecting them all, and then reading all the little messages on the Valentines. So that's kind of like the inspiration I have when it comes to Valentines.
All right, well, thank you so much, Colleen. Before I introduce our next panelist, some of you have already found it, but I'd like to call out the chat box. We are going to have some time for interaction between you as the viewers and our panelists. So if, as they are introducing some of the projects that they've got going on in the bundle, you have questions about those projects or something you'd like to hear them speak about, go ahead and drop that in the chat box. We actually already have a little bit of interaction going, people introducing themselves to each other and to the viewers and where you're from. So keep that chat going as well. We love that kind of interaction. We will get into that chat box a little more in depth later after we finish all of these fun introductions. So that being said, it's time to hop to the studio. So we're first going to talk to Emily Steffen. So Emily, same thing as Colleen. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then also what are some of these fun projects that you created that are included in this free Valentine's Day bundle?
Awesome. So my name is Emily, and I have a studio called Oh Yay Studio. And I feel like I am a maker of all kinds. I love that Colleen just said that she's all about the quilting and all the things, and I love that so much. I feel like my grandma was very similar to that, and she was a huge inspiration for how I was becoming a curious person and a creative person growing up. So the things I have in the bundle are some sewing projects, and I also bring it back to like nostalgia when I was a kid of some friendship bracelets. This is like a giant friendship bracelet that I turned into like a little door hanger. I've turned these into bookmarks before, and the pattern is so stinking easy. If you're 7 or 70, you totally can do this. And I remember, walking around all summer, we were just reminiscing before the live started about making friendship bracelets all summer long, and it's totally like family friendly for holidays too. So this is a heart bracelet that is in that pattern. And then I have This is one of my sewing projects, and it's so simple, so easy, and it's made with wool, so it's a lot of like very easy sewing. And it's just this little zipper pouch. I have 2 little kiddos at home, or I guess one's not so little anymore. But my daughter, who's my youngest, is constantly needing pouches for her treasures and her collections. So this was like a little, fun little Valentine one that I made for her one year. I feel like it's maybe similar to most of us that, it's one of those, Valentine's is one of those small holidays that you just want to like love people and share some fun ideas and do a little something special for your family or with your family. So I love that we have this bundle, because not only am I like, my brain is turning, right, that we have all these ideas and we can bounce off each other, but similar that like there's a tradition of waking up and having something red or pink. My mom actually used to color our mashed potatoes pink on Valentine's Day, which I think about now, it's kind of weird because you'd think there'd be like a pink treat, but no, it was pink mashed potatoes, which I'm sure she put red food coloring in, but they turned pink because it's mashed potatoes. So anyway, I have this sewing pattern. I have the friendship bracelet that can also be a bookmark or a door hanger. And then I also have a really simple sewn zipper pouch. So like I said, my daughter is young and has collections, and it's just a really simple sewing zipper pouch that's also included. And you can make it big or small, and I love it because you can make it out of scraps, and it is like maybe 5 seams, and they're all straight seams. So if you're a beginning sewist, this is amazing. And I actually this summer made a huge one of those for all of our sand toys that end up all over in my car. So that's a really versatile pattern, but I'm so excited. I love these events where there's lots of people here, because I feel like I said, my ideas and my wheels are turning in my head to have new ideas and exciting patterns coming.
Oh, Emily, one more question for you. So you just mentioned it's pretty beginner friendly, that one particular craft. Would your projects be good for kids to try if people want to start introducing these crafts to their kids?
100%. So the friendship bracelet pattern, like my daughter is 7, and she does sometimes get a little bit confused about the forward knot, backward knot, but this whole project is 2 kinds of knots. And once you get the knots down, which is literally just kind of how you fold over the strings, it is so beginner friendly and so kid friendly. And I feel like, unlike maybe traditional quilting where things are more precise, the kind of sewing patterns I have, and this is a little note or maybe a teaser to next week for the Valentine's Day Maker series, I do have also these little lip pillows. Apparently there's a lip theme happening in my life, but I feel like I come up with patterns because I have little kids. I'm trying to inspire my kids, and I'm just doing things that are, as a young mom, you're like, oh, hey, my kids are young and I want to get them excited about something, and it's also kind of the world I'm in. So I feel like this is also like 3 seams, really easy. This one is actually like a teensy more complicated. Quite frankly, it feels more complicated than it is because of the zipper. But if you have a kiddo who's maybe sewn a couple times before, helping with this zipper honestly would give them like loads of confidence to feel like they could tackle the entire world with sewing. So I always say, when you're trying to teach kids new things, like just to go for it and have fun and be there obviously with them to guide them and help them. So I think a lot of crafts are very kid friendly, and I hope that the ones I have also are.
All right, well, that is Emily Steffen. Your sweatshirt is super cute, Dina says.
Thank you.
We are appreciating the cute sweatshirt. And I have to also say a happy birthday to Alexandria. So Alexandria is spending her birthday in the sewing room, quilting and watching videos. So happy birthday, Alexandria. All right, we're going to keep an eye on the chat box still, but I want to continue to introduce our panelists here. And next up, we're staying in the studio with Brenda. So next to Emily, we've got Brenda KB Anderson. Same deal. I would love for you to tell us about the projects you've included and just a little bit about yourself as well.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Brenda KB Anderson. I'm the managing editor of the Creative Crochet Corner. But I crochet a lot, but I also knit and paint and lots of sewing. Actually, that was my main profession up until recently, was sewing. And I like to dabble in all crafts. I get very excited about everything craftsy, everything artsy. But anyway, so to introduce my projects that I brought with me here today, this is called the Big Hearted Cable Scarf. So you can see there's a cable pattern that looks like hearts. Let me turn it around this way. There we go. And I was thinking about when I designed this, I was thinking, I knew I wanted to make a cable scarf, and I was going for a heart theme. So I started looking at some knitting patterns and looking at some cabling and knitting, because I didn't find anything like this. I mean, maybe there's something like this out there for crochet, but I didn't find it. So I was looking, sometimes I will look for knitting cables, and then I kind of base my crochet cables off of the knitting cables that I've seen before, or inspired by those. So another thing I was thinking about when I made this scarf, a lot of times when you crochet cables, what you're doing is you're working a stitch that's kind of ends up being these raised bits. Those are called post stitches. So instead of working into the top of your stitch where you normally work, you slide your hook around the post of the stitch, and what you're doing is you're making a stitch on the front of your work instead of along the top edge of your work. So it kind of grows out of the front. So that's what makes these cables happen. It makes those little bits pop in front of the background fabric. But what happens then is when you crochet into the post and you ignore the tops of the stitches, then when you look at the back side of your fabric, you see all those ridges and rows of the tops of your, the stitches that you worked around the post instead of working into the post. You see all these ridges along the back. And for me, when I wear a scarf, I'm not always very careful when I'm running out the door and I'm going to be late. So I'm just like, woo, wrap it around, and I don't want to think about like wrapping it perfectly, making sure the inside's really on the inside. So I just wanted the back of my scarf to look nicer. So I figured out a way to connect those unworked ridges to the next row. So it's one of those things it's a little bit complicated to explain, but I did do a live video of this, so I highly recommend watching that if you're going to make this pattern so you can see how that happens. But basically, every time you make a stitch on the wrong side, you're going to be connecting, well, not every time, but when you want to connect those ridges that are left over, you insert your hook underneath one of the leftover ridges from the row below, and you connect it to the current working row. So you're kind of pulling them up and sort of smushing them into your fabric. And that way, the back looks nice and the front looks nice, and you don't have to worry about it. The other thing I wanted to show you guys are these mittens. These are called Thrum Lovin' mittens. And all these little colorful hearts, they're just made by using a big piece of roving that you felt with your hands into a circular shape, and then you crochet it into your work as you're going along. So you just lay that thing onto your work, crochet around it, and then keep going. So that way, it's actually really awesome. A lot of times when you're doing some kind of color work, you have to carry that yarn all the way through. Things can get kind of tangly if you're newer to it. But this way, you're not going to get your stitches tangled up because you're just using one succinct, you're just connecting this little piece and then moving on to the next. You don't have all these, you're not working with two long strands at the same time. So let me show you what the inside looks like. The whole purpose of using these little chunks of roving is to get all this fluffy stuff on the inside of your mitten, so that it just hangs around in there. And I haven't actually been wearing these. I've been keeping these as a sample. But as you wear them, this starts to felt to the inside of your mitten, and then it makes that extra coating of warmth right there. And it keeps your hands much warmer. So for right now, when I put this on, it feels like a very fluffy, fuzzy, putting your hand on a sheep or something. I guess it's got that extra padding, but over time it will felt itself to the inside of your mitten. My daughter has a pair of these that I made as a sample, the child sample, and she's been wearing those, and it's been felting, so it's doing its job. So that's kind of exciting. The other thing I wanted to show you, actually two more things. The earrings I'm wearing, these are going to be my live for next week if you guys are curious about these. So these are a little crocheted heart, and then I used some gold metallic paint to paint the top, and then I slid a little chain through and attached it to some fishhook earrings. They're so easy, they're really fast. It's kind of a fun multimedia project. And it's a really good introduction to working with very thin yarns. If you've never done that before, it can, it's just one of those things you have to be able to see it and be able to feel where the little stitches are and hanging on to it. It is a little bit more challenging than using like a worsted weight yarn or something like that. So it's a good introduction to that because it's a very small little project, so you can get a feel for that. But if you are not interested in working with very thin yarns and you want to make like small pillow kind of shape or something to hang on a doorknob, some kind of decoration, then you can certainly follow this pattern and make a larger version of it with worsted weight or super bulky or something like that. So that's kind of fun. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, this was a very last minute project that I dreamed up last night, as I often do. This I wanted to show you guys. I made these little hearts out of grocery bags. And I'm gonna do like a really quick demo so you can see how they're done. But basically it's just 2 layers of the grocery bags that I decorated with these paint markers. I used some acrylic, non-toxic, just acrylic paint markers so that it would show up on my grocery bags. Of course, you could use any kind of paper. If you wanted to use construction paper or something like that, use red or pink paper, whatever, that's fine too. But I just wanted this project to be something where it uses up, materials that I already had in my house. So the way that it's constructed, there's 2 pieces and they overlap each other here on the front, like this. So you can see there's a little, it's actually like a dart. It's kind of, using my sewing experience here. So when you put these together, it creates a little bit of a curve on the front. Maybe I can show you from the side. So there's a little bit of a curve to this paper, so there's room to stuff the candy in. The candy, you guys, that's what this is really about. It's just about delivering candy, having an excuse to go buy candy today. So, if that's okay, Leah, should I launch into just showing a quick demo of this, or should we come back to that?
I think we should come back to that. We've got a couple other things that I want to cover first, and then we can come on back for a little bonus demo. Okay. I also wanted to point out too, there was a question about your scarf tutorial. Is there a tutorial for it? And yes, I know Brenda mentioned it, but you can also, if you're interested in that tutorial, the link to that specific one, the big hearted crochet scarf, our team has dropped that into the chat box, so you can find the link there. But all of these have tutorials that you can go and find the free links on the Craftsy page too. So if you have this packet and you're really interested, go find the live tutorial. They're available for you after the fact. So even today's chat is available after the fact. So you will be able to find this on the page to come back to later if there's anything you want to revisit in the future. So our last finalist is not in the studio, so we're going to have to jump to her home studio. It is Jen Lucas. Jen, please tell us a little bit about yourself and the cute little heart-shaped dishcloths that you designed for Craftsy. They're included in this free Valentine's Day bundle.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm Jen Lucas. I'm a knit and crochet designer, and I'm the managing editor for the Knitting Circle.
Been waiting to clear my throat.
I'm the managing editor of the Knitting Circle, and then also I contribute both to Craftsy and the Creative Crochet Corner as well. So my project for today is my heart-shaped dishcloth, and it's just such a cute, easy little project. And really, even if you're a beginner knitter, this is something that you can very easily make. So it just is worked all in garter stitch. So we're only using knitting stitches. We're not even purling for this dishcloth, which makes it nice. We're doing a little slip stitch on the edge here just to make a nice little detail. And then you would be learning about some other basic knitting techniques. I do, the heart is started down here, and then you're going to increase on both sides. And then when you get up here to the top part, you will be attaching a second ball of yarn to do 1/2, and you'll also be doing some decreases up here. So even if you're very new to knitting, this is a great project because you're learning a lot of those basic knitting techniques just in this dishcloth. And like Leah mentioned and Brenda mentioned with her scarf, this one I have done a live tutorial for, so you would be able to go and find that if you want some step-by-step video instruction on how to make it, or you can just follow the pattern that's in the download. But I also wanted to quickly bring up one of Brenda's patterns that's in the download that I just made because I wanted to make it, and that is her crocheted Valentine's Day hearts. And in the pattern, the way she did it is that she put these little hearts on Valentine's Day cards, which is so super cute. But I decided to just crochet them in a bunch of rainbow colors and attach them to some yarn. And then I hang this in my office year round, and it's so cute. So just to give you an idea about another one of those patterns that is in the bundle, you can take these little crochet hearts. They're only 2 or 3 rounds. And then you can make all kinds of cool little projects with it. So I love to both knit and crochet. So when I saw that Brenda had put this little pattern out, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to crochet all the hearts. It's so cute. And this one, again, is pretty beginner friendly too as well. You're just doing some basic crochet stitches. So either one of those projects would be great. If you're a beginner, you'll learn some new things. And if you're not a beginner, it will take you no time to knit or crochet either one of these.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you to all of our panelists. That brings us through our introductions. So if you are just joining us, we have an hour with these 4 panelists, and they are sharing their ideas for celebrating your special ones and spreading all of the love this Valentine's Day. And they designed a bundle of patterns. That's what they've been shouting out for us and giving us a little preview about. These patterns are free for you to download right now. The bundle includes 14 patterns, 3 recipes, and nearly 100 pages of instruction. So just click the link in the description so you can download your bundle right now. This is going to be the time that we have to dig into the chat box a little bit, get to know our instructors a little bit more as well. So if you have questions for any of our instructors, feel free to go ahead and drop those into the chat box. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for some of those to come through, I believe Brenda had teased a little surprise demo. So Brenda, I'm going to send it back to you in the studio for you to take us through your midnight inspired Valentine's Day heart.
Sometimes midnight brings about really good
That
things.
should be what this is titled.
Sometimes it doesn't, and then the next morning you're like, what was I thinking last night? So I had to test it out on my friends here. Like, was this a good idea?
No, it's a great idea.
Okay, so at home I had, I wasn't going to go to the store at midnight and go buy these supplies. So I just was using the things that I had. I had a grocery bag, and I had a hole punch and some scissors, and then I had these acrylic paint markers. You could use regular paint markers, but they're kind of stinky. Some of them are.
Yeah,
but
I'd agree.
so I would find the acrylic paint markers. These are non-toxic. I just bought these on Amazon. But certainly use something at your house. If you already have something, use regular markers. Use paint. You can use stamping stuff and ink, like whatever you want to do to decorate these things. It really, really, this is a very open-ended project. But what I wanted to do was make like little tiny Valentines that you can either hang up on a garland like this, but they're, also covering up chocolate. Or, the conversation hearts, which I feel like are a little bit subpart of the chocolate myself, but maybe you guys have other ideas about that. Or you can give them as Valentines to people. They don't take very much time to make. So let me show you how I did it. All I did was I cut open my grocery bag and just cut a chunk off. This is just the side. And then I cut out a heart shape. So when you cut your heart, probably think about making it just a little longer than you actually want it to be, and I'll show you why in just a second. So like a little bit taller than you actually want it to be. All right, so here's my heart shape. Open it up. And then the next step is we're not going to care about this little point down here that I didn't cut very well because I'm going to cut that off. So the next step is we're going to be cutting basically like a dart. And we're just going to cut that most of the way up, leave about maybe 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, just depending on the size of the heart that you're making. Leave a little bit. And then you're going to overlap the 2 tips of the heart so that the measurement from here to here is about 1 inch or so. I mean, again, you can certainly eyeball this. If you overlap it more, it'll be a bigger dart and your heart will stick out more. But at some point, it's going to start looking kind of weirdly pointed. So I would just recommend, measure with your eyeballs from here to here, and that should be about 1 inch. Then you're just going to snip these extra little bits off because we don't need those anymore. And then this is what you're going to use to cut out the back side. So I use the puffy side as the front side, but you can decide that you want it to be the other way around and have it flat on the front, whatever. So this is still folded here. And then you just line up the tip of kind of the indentation of your heart right here. And then this corner of your heart. So it's going to overlap off of the fold just a little bit. And then we're going to cut out this heart shape. And you can if it makes it easier for you to just trace that, maybe if you're doing this with a kid, have them trace it with a pencil or something like that. But I'm just gonna hold it there because I'm doing this quickly. Then you just cut around like that. And then you're gonna punch. Actually, the next thing I did was I decorated my heart. And you can actually decorate it before you cut out the heart if that's easier and you want the pattern to kind of go off the sides. But one thing that I did, I decorated them all in different ways, but this heart, I drew a bunch of little paint marker hearts on it, and then I used this metallic gold paint marker to write words, like lovey-dovey words. Does anybody have any suggestions of lovey-dovey words I should write on this heart?
Like smooch.
Smooch. So you just can draw on there with your paint marker.
I love those paint markers. We use them all the time at home.
You know, I'm not going to take the time to completely fill this in or anything, but just to give you an idea what these paint markers can do. Or you can, yeah, of course, you can do this with regular paint, you know, Sharpie markers on top of paint, however you want to do it, but smoochy.
Smoochy.
Smoochy. Whoops.
It's kind of a long word.
Smoochy. But it shows up on top of the red, and it looks kind of cool. So if you had, you know, taken the time to do a bunch of that, you could do that like this. This one I wrote the word love on. There were a couple that I just drew around and around. I used my paint markers to go around and around and around and around, kind of scribbling in different colors of the heart. But anyway, after you decorate it however you want to, and this is just, you know, this is a great project for kids because they can just go crazy with the decorating. It makes them really special. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to hold your, let me move this out of the way. You're going to hold your heart so that it is actually crossing over to make that dart that we talked about. Okay, so your point should match up. And you're going to lay that on top of the back piece. And then you're just going to use your hole punch to make some holes in it that you can lace through. So I made my hole punches maybe a little over a 1/2 inch apart. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you just keep punching your holes and holding them together until you get around to the top, and then just make sure you have one at the center. So you might have to kind of readjust. Like, see, when I lay these together, because of that dart, they're not going to match down here, but that's okay. Don't worry about that. Just worry about matching those top 2 V's, and then you can slide your hole punch in there and get one right in the center. And once you've got your hole punches halfway around, then you can take these pieces off, fold it in half, and then you can make, you know, mirror image, basically, hole punches by just finding the holes that you already put in there. So when you open it up, you'll have holes around here. You'll do the same thing with this piece. You fold that in half, use those as a guide to punch the rest of your holes. So you should have your holes all the way around, like this. And then you can lace them together. So I started at the top, and I just used yarn, but you could use, you know, whatever you have at your house. Twine, string, ribbon would be really cool. Skinny strips of fabric that you rip, you know, because these holes are actually pretty big. You just have to be careful that when you're pulling it through, it's not going to rip your paper. So you don't want it so tight that you're having a hard time. So I'm using doubled yarn and a yarn needle to thread this through, and I just came up through the center, and I leave a little bit of a tail there, and then you just keep lacing. Every time you take a stitch, you're going from underneath to the top, or you could lace it the opposite way, always going down, 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 down. But basically what you're trying to do is you're just doing a whip stitch. You're just having the yarn go around the edges of your 2 pieces to sew them together. This is just like those lacing cards that kids can use when they're, you know, first learning how to sew. It's kind of like a shoelace, and you're lacing it through sort of like maybe a wooden piece or cardboard or something. I don't remember what they were made out of, but I remember doing that when I was really young and learning how to sew. So so you're just going to work your way around, and actually you don't even have to worry about putting your candy in until the very end because of the slit. You just can open it up and pour it in there in a little bit. So I wanted to point out one part here at the bottom. You just have to make sure that your heart corners are matching up so you can get through that one hole. Actually, it's 3. 1, 2, and 3. All those 3 are going to be together. So that's what helps create the bottom and kind of makes that little dart shape in the top of your, in the front surface of your heart to give you a little extra room for the extra candy.
Speaking of candy, while you're finishing up, we have a question that popped in. Beth wants to know what everybody's favorite Valentine's Day candy is. So if you want to one by one, we'll start with Emily in the studio first. What's your favorite candy?
I am a huge chocolate fan, so chocolate in any form is acceptable to me, whether it's cake form, brownie form, little tiny chocolate form. We have a local, I'm from Hudson, Wisconsin, which I know is like small little river town, and there is the best little local chocolatier if you're ever in the area. He has the cutest little like old-fashioned candy store, and I love it. So chocolate all the way, 100%.
All right, Jen, what about you? What's your favorite?
Yeah, like Emily, definitely a chocolate fan. Currently, I like a peanut butter cup situation. That's the way to my heart, is a peanut butter cup. So yeah, that's the current fave, but I really won't turn down any chocolate.
That sounds very fair. Colleen, what about you?
Okay, if you're gonna have chocolate, it has to have caramel. I'm sorry, but chocolate with a caramel filling, like a Dove chocolate, something that's always a really big winner. On the craft tours trip, I brought some chocolates back from Austria. Oh my gosh. If you're ever in Austria, buy chocolate.
All right, so we got a lot of votes for chocolate. Brenda, take us home. What do you think when you're filling this? What candy are you putting in?
I wish I was going to say not chocolate, but I'm going to say chocolate. I like dark chocolate. I like chocolate with peanut butter. I like all the chocolates. I have chocolate right here just in case we need it during this. But I do have to say, I really do love these conversation hearts, not for the taste, but just for the nostalgia. I can't help but buy them. They're just, I don't know, it reminds me of my childhood. Yeah. And I like to have those once a year. It's not for the taste. Because after I eat one of these, I'm like, let's have some of the real candy. Give me a piece of chocolate.
I have to agree. It's, for me, candy corn only in the fall, conversation hearts only at Valentine's Day, and Peeps only at Easter. I never really like them the rest of the year, but there's something about tying them to the holiday that work really well. All right, let's see the end of that project, Brenda.
All right, so I have gone all the way around, and I just wanted to show the very last stitch. You're gonna go up through that same one that you've already went up through before. And then you can cut your piece however long you want it to be, and then tie a little knot here. And then you may be wondering, like, how easy is it to get the candy in there? So that's why I brought the candy. Well, that's why I'm telling everyone I brought the candy. So to get that open, instead of just pulling up on this, you can slide your fingers in, and you have to allow the whole envelope to open all the way down to here. And you really can't stuff it in this side until it goes in this side first, and then you close it and slide it into that side. So I'm going to show you how that works. So we'll just put some chocolates in there. Let's put a few conversation hearts in there just for conversation's sake. All right, so you can kind of open it up like that, dump some in, and then shake them down, and then you can kind of push this back up, and you can slide them into the other side. I know you can't see them because they're in there, but maybe you can kind of see it puffing up. But if you want to pack more in, you have to kind of do it in 2 shifts, like dump it in there, shift it over, hold it down with your finger, and then you can add more conversation hearts and another piece of chocolate. And there we go. And so the weird thing is they don't fall out. Like, you wouldn't think that tiny little amount of overlap would keep them from falling out. But I mean, I tested it out. I kind of swung it around a little bit. Nothing came out. But if you're worried about it, it might be worth getting some, like a little red heart sticker or something like that, just to put on that overlap piece if you're concerned about losing the candy. But I mean, you'd be surprised. It seems like it wants to stay in there. So there it is.
It's cute.
Brenda, I just had this image of you swinging that around.
Yep.
I have a question for Brenda. I have
Okay.
a question for Brenda about this. Can I just ask it real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
So I was thinking about, well, I mean, of course you would want to stuff this with candy because who wouldn't? But I also was thinking about, like I like to cross stitch a lot and like make, well, ideally I would cross stitch and then fully finish these things into little pillows. But I was wondering, could you like just put a little bit of like fiber fill in there and then like glue the seam where the dart is to like just make it a little bit puffy so it's like more of a like a permanent decoration?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want it, are you saying you don't want it to open, right? You just want it to be
Yeah,
filled
like
with
you would just
fiber
like put
fill?
some fiber. Yeah.
Yeah, what I would do, I mean, you could also just sew that seam too. Instead of overlapping the two pieces, you could just
Sew a dart.
Okay, hold on. I have something I can show. You could just sew a dart instead. So instead of having it overlap like this, how we did, we just left it overlapping so that way it would keep the candy in and you could access it. But instead of that, you could actually just make this into two pieces so that you have enough seam allowance. Here, let me show you. Ooh. Yeah, I didn't bring a pencil, but we have paint markers still. So instead of, this shape here, because what's happening here is this amount is the dart right here, right? So in order to make it rounder, you can either cut out two pieces and have a very skinny seam allowance up here, or one piece, sorry, with that slit with a very skinny seam allowance. But what I would do is I would just add a little extra seam allowance so that you have, your seam allowance here. Or really what you're doing is you're just kind of cutting out a slightly curved side here to the heart to give it that extra dimension. But with the fabric, you might not even need that. Part of the reason I did this was because part of the reason I put the dart in here was because it was paper. Paper doesn't stretch at all. But if you're using cross-stitching fabric, you might not even need that. When you're sewing the two pieces together, it's probably fine to just stuff it. But if you really wanted it to be more plump, it'd probably be good to put that seam in.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, we have about 15 minutes left with our panelists, so I'm going to get to some questions here. So the camera's on Jen right now. So Jen, I'm going to have you start with this one. This comes from Kelly. Kelly says, I love how creative you all are. And Kelly wants to know, do you always make your own Valentine's Day cards or do you ever buy them? Jen, what about you?
Yeah, so I've always been more of a buy my card person instead of making a card. I do love paper crafting, but when you do all the crafts, you don't always have time for all the crafts. So typically I do buy a card. I will be honest, in the last few years, my husband and I just kind of like have the discussion of, are we going to buy Valentine's Day cards this year? Are we not? This year we're so far leaning no, but we're after you get married, you've been married for a long time or with your partner for a long time, you're just kind of like, I love you every day. So, maybe we'll buy cards, maybe we won't. Maybe we should set a challenge for ourselves that we make our own cards this year. Right? That might be fun.
All right, how about you, Colleen?
We usually do make cards, or not make cards, buy cards for each other. And usually there's a sentiment inside. And we've had the debate about whether or not to buy cards or not. But he always, it's always adding stuff to it. I'm like, you may as well make a card while you're at it because you write so much into it. But if you're into the making the card, then here's the placemat to, slide it into to give it at the end of a meal or whatever. And, there's other ways of creating this placemat too. I created 3 other options, which I did not ever get quilted, but you don't have to do traditional pink. I used some really bright, funky fabrics here with a light gray background, traditional red so that it really pops out, but it still has that pocket. And the last one, of course, there's always the pink and red. That's kind of the throwback to my mom's pink and red socks for Valentine's Day to wear to school. So, but cards, I think there's always that throwback to those little Valentine cards that we scribbled our names on and put in those little funny envelopes that didn't really close very well. And you had to make sure you had to have one for everybody in your class. So I think that card thing, I don't know. I think the card company really got that ingrained in us by first or second grade to buy cards. So it's always fun to find those. And I even, I think in the past, I've done things for my grandkids. I'm not sure they've gotten any they've gotten other things in the last couple of years instead.
All right, let's jump back to the studio. What about you, Emily? Do you make or buy?
So my girlfriends and I get together on or around Valentine's Day every year, which is the 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. And we started, I don't even know how this started. I was thinking about this as you were asking the question. We make cards, and it is like a disastrous situation, usually on my kitchen table or one of my friends' kitchen tables. And we make them for each other or for our spouses. And, we have beverages of choice. Lots of desserts are happening, and our rhyming skills are always top notch that night. So I feel like the creativity is really good. And we sometimes try and create our own pop-ups, so we make cards, and they're not maybe social media worthy to share because our skills maybe aren't the greatest, but it is so fun. And I don't know how the tradition started, but I love that we do it.
Yes. All right, let's finish it off. Brenda, how are you doing your cards?
We definitely make our cards at our house. Part of the reason is because I'm not organized enough to have like stockpile of cards ahead of time for anything ever. Like it's always my
Same.
Like next time I'm at Target, I'm gonna go and look at the cards. And I'll never do that. So yeah, we always make our cards, and actually it kind of forces us to be creative and have some fun with it. And then I think people enjoy getting a handmade card too. They like that. They're not going to get another one like that ever. And my kids make cards for us, and it's I don't know. Those are like my favorite cards to get is cards that kids make for me.
Oh, well, we've got a half and half here. So I think we're well represented. Make and buy. To make, to buy. I love it. We've got a comment here from user LRS. My husband and I have been recycling our cards for over 20 years. So that seems like another one of those traditions that just happens, and 20 years now that's exciting and lovely. And you know what? That might be something that I would be doing. All right, let's continue on and dig through. I believe we may have temporarily lost Colleen, so when she pops back in, we'll include her as well. This is a fun kind of silly question. So think back to the Valentine's Day gifts you have received. What would you say is the silliest one, or maybe weirdest, unsuccessful, so to speak? What did you get on Valentine's Day that made you
asking that question?
And we're gonna start in the studio. Go ahead, Brenda. Why don't you start us off with this?
Okay, well, I don't know if this counts, but let me give you a little background. I've never really been super into celebrating Valentine's Day in the romantic sense of Valentine's Day, because I always kind of felt like it was a good time for people to have unrealistic expectations crushed.
Yeah, yep.
So I was kind of like one of those people who was like, yeah, I don't do that. I don't do the Valentine's Day thing. So I think any boyfriend I ever had was like, yes, awesome. But the worst Valentine's Day present I ever got from a boyfriend was, my boyfriend was like, hey, he called me on the phone. He's like, we're not doing anything for Valentine's, right? That's like not a thing, right? Okay, because I'm going to go hang out with my ex-girlfriend just because she's in town. So I'm like, oh, yep, that's over. So that was that was the worst Valentine's Day present I ever got. Yeah.
All right, Emily, can you top that?
Well, my husband is gifts are one of his love languages, right? And I've had to learn this over the time of being married and being together. And one Valentine's Day, we've never been traditionally people to exchange gifts. I'm similar to you of like, this is just creating expectations that are bound to be ruined. But he loves giving gifts. He loves shopping for a gift that you're really gonna love, and I've learned to appreciate that. Well, one year he gave me, this is maybe aging me, he gave me a GPS. And like the thing that you suction cup to your dashboard. And I was like, well, this is really practical. And I think those words came out of my mouth of like, this is really practical. And he's like, but don't you love it? It's gonna get you from point A to point B, and it's something you totally need. And he's going on and on about how thoughtful, and he's thought this out, and he's researched on which one I should have. And I like didn't open the box for months. And this is the thing you'll learn about me is like, I realized real fast actually how great of a gift that was. But in the moment, again, expectations,
like,
I was like, a GPS.
Ah.
Wow, perfect.
So it's never get lost. Thanks.
Right. I mean, thank you for caring about my navigation.
Yeah.
We do have Colleen back. So, Colleen, I'm going to have Jen answer the question first to give you a little time to think about this one. But we're talking about maybe our least successful Valentine's Day gift we've received. So, I'm going to send it over to Jen first, and then you can think about your answer.
So, my husband and I, we aren't big on necessarily exchanging gifts at Valentine's Day. But I am thinking back to, maybe 13, 14 years ago when we were dating and, we already were living in the same house, planning our life together, but we're still, not engaged or anything. And I just remember like thinking every single holiday or like anything that happened, like I'm gonna get this engagement ring. I'm gonna get this. Like I know it's coming because we had gone and shopped for it, and it really didn't end up working out for my husband because we already lived together. The bill for the engagement ring like came from the jeweler, and like. I'm like calling my sister being like, what do I do? Do I just write yes on the, on the bill, or like whatever. But yeah, so that's just like one thing where I don't know. I don't think he was going to give it to me for Valentine's Day. I got it like a little bit later than that. But it was just funny because every holiday that came, I thought, oh, this is happening. We're going to a fancy dinner. It's happening. And then it was like, I didn't know if he had the ring or not, but then the bill came and I knew that he did have it. So.
All right, Colleen, we're finishing off with your story here. Share something with us.
Okay, so of all the ones here, I've been married the longest, and probably almost a total of all of your years, 34 years and counting. So as I was thinking about this last night, I couldn't think of anything, and then it came to me. We would a lot of times do a meal at home, and so we would prepare a meal together, and we would feed the kids early. They'd be off to bed. We'd have a late dinner, just the two of us. And so that kind of became a tradition. But a few years, it's been quite a few years now. I'm trying to remember how many years back. But we had planned, okay, we're going to make a meal together. But my husband was traveling. He got snowed in I think in Washington, D.C. or New York. I think it was D.C. on Valentine's Day. And I'm like, well, honey, on the phone, I'm like, well, happy Valentine's Day. I don't know what I'm having for supper now, but he spent Valentine's Day sleeping in one of the places in Washington, D.C. and said, never sleep in that section of the airport because it gets really cold at night. And it's like, that's got to be the most epic fail Valentine's Day ever is when you're half a country apart on Valentine's Day. Oh, I guess there's another epic fail. I was in Bali for Valentine's Day one year, but anyway. You get married and you're married 34 years, Valentine's Day is going to have some variation in it eventually. So, but usually it's usually a win.
Well, I'm sure with all of these patterns, we're going to be creating some wins with our Valentine's Days this year. We do have a very small amount of time. I want to give each of our panelists another minute or so to share their final thoughts, any ideas or tips that maybe you want to add in at the last minute. You'll each have about a minute to chat, and then I will let everybody go with a couple last minute announcements. And Colleen, we'll just start with you. Any final thoughts for this Valentine's Day that you want to share?
When it comes to Valentine's Day, it is kind of a short holiday for most of us. We don't do a huge amount of decorating. So create those small things that bring back memories, that remind you of why you love that person in your life, or your grandkids, your kids, however it is. Just make sure that you reach out, do those small things, and you create the memories for the next generation, because you have all those memories of those things that your mom or your aunt or a special friend did for you. So just keep those memories going, create memories for the next generation, and have some fun at it. There's been so many good ideas today. I've been taking notes on things. I'm like, ooh, my grandkids love to do sewing cards. We're gonna have to do some of those paper hearts. So take one idea, run with it, and enjoy the holiday.
All right. Well, thank you so much for those closing words. We're going to get Jen's closing words next.
Yeah, just, like Colleen said, it's about creating those special little moments. And I would say, I think sometimes as crafters, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to craft for every single holiday and every single event. But just remember that there's a lot of ways that you can show love to your partner, your family, your friends. There's lots of ways that you can show love that go beyond just crafting. And so, yes, of course, we all love to craft, and we love, I always feel like someone knows I really, really love them if I make them a craft. But there's also other ways to show people that you love them without putting that pressure on yourself. So, we still got a couple weeks till Valentine's Day. So, you might have time to do some crafts. But if you don't, hey, that's okay too.
All right, let's pass it back to the studio for our final two panelists to share their final thoughts. Brenda, we'll start with you.
Okay, I just wanted to say, although maybe my Valentine's Day experience wasn't so great in my younger adulthood, and I, have moved on since then, and now I see Valentine's Day as just a day to appreciate everyone that you care about, whether it's your partner or, your kids or your neighbor or whoever. And I also wanted to say another thing to think about is being able to craft with somebody else for Valentine's Day, whether you're making something like, for example, sometimes my daughters and I will make a Valentine's Day craft together for my husband. So that's another thing to think about too, is bringing somebody into teaching them a craft or working on a very simple craft like this one, this little heart craft. Anyone can do that. You can do that with your kids or your neighbor, whoever, but making those things together to give out, or like you were talking about, getting together on Valentine's Day to make cards together. It's just another way to get those really good memories happening, and celebrate it that way.
Emily, anything to add to that?
I was actually literally going to say that same thing. One of my favorite things is our Galentine's tradition, and I've learned that I can place very high expectations on myself as a crafter. Like Jen was saying, our ideas are endless and our time is limited. So one thing that I feel like is that maybe a hack is that very idea of just get people together, celebrate together. It doesn't have to be this 37-hour prepared thing that you go all out for. You can just have the supplies ready and get together, and man, it's a good time when you craft with other people.
Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you to all of our viewers for spending this hour with us. Our instructors are fantastic. Again, Jen Lucas, Brenda KB Anderson, Emily Steffen, and Colleen Tauke. Thank you for joining us and sharing all of your ideas. And for all of our viewers, we want you to make sure to download your free Valentine's Day bundle now by clicking the link in the bio. And don't forget to join us again all of next week, starting January 30th, for 5 all new live tutorials and free patterns. Hope to see you next week. Until then, happy crafting.